bonus part of the video. So I'm here, it's been a long day, but I'm here in Subaru of Cherry Hill down in South Jersey. I'm here to pick up the Subaru BRZ, my Subaru BRZ. It's been in the shop for 40 days, and waiting for something for 40 days it's hard. It's because, you know, I've been calling them nonstop, almost like on a daily basis at sometimes, but it's all here, and I'm about to try it out and see if it runs, and I'm gonna take it home. So let's turn it on. Yes, it's working. It's working with 93,882 miles on the odometer. So I want to thank Dan, the service manager at Subaru of Cherry Hill, for dealing with me on a daily basis, answering my phone calls when he didn't really have to. And I also want to thank Lloyd. He's the technician that brought this car back to life. So thank you guys. And of course, this wouldn't really be possible without the help of Subaru Corporate. They really stepped in here and did me a solid one because, again, you know, they didn't really have to do any of this stuff, but I told them what's up, and you know, the fact that I got it for 6 days and it broke down, but they were able to help me out. Without their help, this project would have been dead in the water, and I would have been not driving anything. So it would have sucked a lot. But thank you so much to Subaru of Cherry Hill for helping me out on this. This is fantastic. This is a huge help, and I want to thank you guys for bringing this back to me in great shape. So with that said, let's take this home and take it for a drive. I'm gonna break this in for the next 1,000 miles and then change the oil, and we'll see where we go from there. Settings in R. I'm just gonna mash it. It's headache inducing. You feel the G's. You feel the G's on your body. Something that a stock BRZ or 86 will never be able to do to your body. But oh my God, that was unreal. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Shifting Lanes. My name is Hanson. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sitting in the not 2013 Subaru BRZ, and the reason I'm not sitting in that one is because that car is still in the shop. It's been 40 days now, and I've never given up anything for 40 days, and I'm here to tell you that giving up a BRZ for 40 days really sucks. But I have good news. I have actually two good news. The first one is that I'm going to pick up the Subaru BRZ tonight from the shop. That's right, it has been sitting at the dealership for 40 days, and that's because they had to go fix a lot of different things. And I'm gonna save that video for next week's episode, and I'll talk to you about all the things that have been replaced in that car, and it's an extensive list. But today, I basically want to produce something that might interest people who love the BRZ and FRS and 86, and that's to talk about the alternatives to the BRZ. So that's a segue into the second good thing about today, is that I'm attending the International Motor Press Association Spring Break. Now that's an event where all the PR folks and all the automotive journalists come together, and we get to drive all the different cars. Basically, it's a bunch of different cars in a parking lot, and you just jump in and drive and then review it. So the way this episode is going to work is I'm going to drive all of these different cars, and I'm going to rate it against the BRZ. If it's on a negative scale, so it's worse than the BRZ. If it's on a positive, then it is better than the BRZ. So I'm going to go from -3 to +3 depending on the car that I'm sitting in. So the first one is this 2019 Toyota Corolla hatchback. It is a completely new platform, and one of the hallmarks is that this thing has a dynamic shift CVT. So while it's a CVT, and it has all the downsides of the CVT, this does have the physical first launch gear. So it's a mechanical gear, and it's supposed to give a more sporting feel when you launch from a dead stop. The drivetrain is front wheel drive. So why is this Corolla hatchback XSE even in consideration when comparing to the BRZ? Well, that's because the Corolla has always appealed to the youth market, and just like the BRZ or FRS, they appeal to the same demographic. Corolla for the past couple of decades have been different than the Trueno hatchback, the Hachiroku that BRZ and 86 owners are so familiar with. When talking about price, features, then this is something that's going to appeal to the youth market. That's the reason why this car kind of deserves to be on this list. The CVT, the physical first gear, really makes a big difference because it doesn't have that lagginess, that uncertainty with a traditional CVT. I could tell that the shift behavior is fairly aggressive, and you can feel the lightness of this car. This is an early model. I don't believe it's available in dealerships yet, but it is coming out later this year. The interior looks pretty upscale here for a Corolla. This has a more modern design. In terms of the feel of the steering, it feels pretty tight. But how does it really compare to the BRZ? It's not really close because the BRZ provides a much more raw experience, and I'm getting a lot of bingings and bongings in here, and that's the one downside of this Corolla, is that it's kind of telling you how to drive. And of course you can kind of turn all these features off, but anytime you exceed the speed limit, there's a little bong, and you'll hear right now. There it is. Acceleration is what you'd expect from a small 4-cylinder car. It's pretty peppy. This thing feels pretty light. I'm gonna put this in the -2 because the BRZ or the 86 provides a much more raw experience. The steering feels much more mechanical, but in here there's a little floatiness to it that you don't feel in the 86 cars. Still, I think it's a fantastic hatchback for people that are just looking for something that is on the sporty side and provides much utility. In terms of utility, there's definitely a lot more space back here than a Subaru, than a BRZ. But for the 2019 Corolla hatchback, I'm going to give this a -2. All right, I am now in the Mazda MX-5 RF. This has the retractable hardtop. It looks more aggressive. It has sleeker lines compared to the soft top. And this still has the 155 horsepower naturally aspirated motor, and compared to the BRZ. And I know a lot of people complain about the 200 horsepower boxer engine, but you know what? You're just not driving fast enough. The Mazda Miata, like the BRZ or 86, is just one of those, it's the momentum cars that you have to drive at the limits. And scrub too much momentum, and you're going to be spending precious seconds trying to get back up to speed. And if you really think that your car doesn't have much power, you really have to take it on these back roads. I'm currently in Bear Mountain in New York. This is where handling, suspension components, steering really comes into play. It becomes more important to have those parts nailed down to perform well in these roads. And that's where the BRZ or 86 and the Mazda Miata and the Fiat 124 Spider really shines, is in these roads. You don't have to go extremely fast, but you definitely want to not scrub as much speed when you're taking these turns. The steering is tight. The shifter is fantastic. It's very clicky. You know when you're in gear. And just downshifting, heel and towing, the pedal placement is just perfect. The steering is perfect. The suspension is just firm. Based on my weird rating scale, I'm gonna give this a 0, as in this feels extremely like the BRZ or the 86. Okay, now leaving in the parking lot in the third car. This might look familiar compared to the car that I just stepped out of, the Miata. This is the Fiat 124, but it's not just any 124. This is the Abarth. So this thing has just slightly more power, better exhaust, and I think just a little bit better suspension too. But this is basically an identical car to the MX-5, and I'm about to take the same roads and see what driving this thing is like. The difference with this car is this is not naturally aspirated. This does have a mini turbocharger mated to that 1.4 multi-air Fiat engine, and this is kind of a rare opportunity where I could just jump out from the MX-5 and jump into a Fiat 124. In terms of power delivery, this, you could definitely feel the turbo lag in this thing. And so you have to make sure that you're in the right gear at all times. If not, that lack of power is going to be ever more apparent. But in terms of handling, steering, suspension work, this is all very similar. This is the same identical car, and it feels very similar to the MX-5, as it should be. But in terms of like power delivery, this has that better mid-range punch. You know, this is a better commuter car compared to the MX-5. This has a much more usable torque band. You know, in terms of like driving at the limits, this is not going to feel as pleasurable as the Miata or the MX-5. Pulling onto the highways, this is going to feel a bit more potent. This has a lot more torque than the MX-5. The exhaust note is a little bit better on this car. This is kind of like a negative 0.5. It's not as polished as the Mazda MX-5 or the Mazda Miata RF that I drove earlier, but it's just the engine is just a different characteristic. This is a lot more usable for daily driving, but in terms of like, you know, driving at 10/10ths, it's just not quite there. But I mean, it's so like, I mean, I'm talking about like minor differences here. But anyway, the Fiat 124 Spider Abarth, negative 0.5. This is the 2018 Ford Mustang GT with the Performance Pack Level 2. 460 horsepower. This is a different class of car compared to the BRZ. This is relatively a cheap sports car to get into. Even though this one specifically with all the goodies, the really fat rear tires, is at $51,000. This is a not your pony car anymore. This is a legitimate sports car. And with 2018, they've made a bunch of changes on the exterior. Of course, it's to make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly, but oh my God, the suspension on this thing the handling is fantastic. Of course, this has Pilot Sport Cup 2s, very sticky tires, though I don't really want to test the limits given that the roads are fairly wet here still. The MagneRide suspension makes this thing feel like a much more nimble car, even though this is fairly heavy. Okay, let's rate this versus the BRZ 86. How does this compare? I'm going to give this, I think, a +2. This is better than the BRZ. Of course, this is a much more expensive car. There's so much more going on, despite it being a much heavier car. This as is, there's just a crap ton of power in the hood. This is a heavy car. It's a big engine, 5-liter V8. Nothing really beats the sound of a V8. I mean, just being able to make that growl, and what a fantastic sound, man. That's why the Ford Mustang sells really, really well, because Ford has been able to deliver such a great performance package at a reasonable price. And this is a global car, so you can buy this everywhere. So as a result, the costs can go down because you're selling so many more cars all over the world. This being a car with 460 horses on tap means that it's just much more ridiculous than the 200 or 205 horsepower BRZ in 86. This is a different league of car, but in terms of your money, this has probably the best bang for your buck. Maybe a little bit better than the Mazda Miata. Okay, car number 5. I should probably have started with this one instead. But this is the Hyundai Elantra GT, the sport trim. This has a 1.6 liter turbo GDI engine making 201 horsepower. So in terms of horsepower figures, this feels very similar to the BRZ in 86. This has a 6-speed, like a proper car should. But yeah, this is going to be the least expensive car in the comparison that I make today. So yeah, when buyers are looking for cars around the $20,000 to $30,000 range, they're going to run into this car. So what is this? This is a traditional hatchback design, 5-door. So already you know that there's a lot of utility. And this is a front-wheel drive turbo GDI engine, 200 horsepower. And let me double check the torque figures here without killing myself. We're looking at 195 pound-feet of torque. So this 1.6 liter is, like, you'll find this across the entire Hyundai lineup. This is the same exact engine that's found in my Hyundai Tucson, which is a crossover. This being a lighter package, this engine feels a little bit more powerful. Looking at the trip meter here, I haven't driven all of these miles, but I'm averaging 28.6 miles per gallon. That is astounding. Of course, when I'm taking it through these back roads, I'm never going to achieve those mileage. But how does this compare to the BRZ in 86? Well, this is going to be in the negative range. This is more like a -3. This feels very, very soft. It's a little worse than the Corolla hatchback. The handling just feels a bit more wallowy. But you know, the engine is relatively peppy. It's got that good mid-range punch, just like most turbos should. I don't really feel much turbo lag. So would I recommend this car? If you're the type of person that would seriously consider a BRZ, then no. This is not something that you're going to be satisfied with, let's just say. This is more of a, maybe it's perfect for like the recent college grad or someone just going to college. You know, there's a lot of utility here, so people could just fit a ton of stuff. You could fit like 4 other friends in here and their crap too. Something that you can't really do in a BRZ, right? You know, 200 horsepower in this car, just because of that turbo punch, that boost that you feel, feels more powerful than the BRZ. But you know, when it comes to like taking this on the track, this thing is just gonna fall flat on its face. There's really no good connection to the road. The suspension setup is built more for comfort, not really for performance driving. How does this compare to the BRZ? -3. Okay, car number 6. If you can't already tell from brown reddish leather interior 2+2 configuration, this is the 2018 Nissan GT-R Premium. This has a twin-turbo V6, a Tesla ETS all-wheel drive system. This is just an amazing piece of machinery. This has 565 horsepower and 467 pound-feet of torque. What does that mean? That means that this is a whole lot more car than the BRZ or the 86. And you can tell it's a lot more car just by looking at the price tag. This costs roughly about 4 BRZs. It's $120,000. It's a whole lot of car. It's a whole lot of power. And it is worth every penny. Why is this car even in this comparison at all? It is much more expensive. It's a different league than the BRZ. Why is it in this comparison? Well, because it's my video and I freaking love this car, so I need to include this car in this comparison. How does this compare to the BRZ or the 86? Well, this is, according to my scale, at the +3. If it goes beyond that, it would go higher than that. This car is heavier, a lot heavier than the BRZ, but you know what? The level of grip, the level of power, oh, just like taking this off-ramp at speed, it's unreal. There's just so much grip. Just accelerating. It takes your breath away. Oh my goodness. This is a 2 hands on the steering wheel at all times type of car. Not because it's unstable or anything like that, but it's so that you don't freak out when you're trying to launch this thing. So let's go from 0. How about that? Let's. I'm going to put this in automatic mode, and then just I have all settings in R. I'm just going to mash it. It's headache inducing. You feel the G's. You feel the G's on your body. Something that a stock BRZ or 86 will never be able to do to your body. But oh my God, that was unreal. You know, I don't have the launch control activated on this thing, so immediately from the get-go it takes a little bit to kind of get up to speed, but once it hooks, you really feel both turbos just putting a lot of boost, and just the kick. This is the whole reason why I love turbo cars. It's just that the sensation that you get. It's very Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You know, just driving it normally on everyday roads, just commuting, feels like a normal car. But then when you want it to get nasty, you can. And it is unreal driving this car. Despite it being 10 years old now. Well, there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to Shifting Lanes and watching till the end. If you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button so you can get notified anytime, and hit that little notification bell so you can get notified anytime we make these videos. So I'm going to follow up next week with a proper update to the BRZ, and I'm going to show you the long list of items that were replaced to get the BRZ up and running again. So I can't wait to put that together. I can't wait to drive the BRZ again. Look out for that. That's coming out next week. So I'm going to wrap it up right there. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Hanson, and I'll see you next time.